So this semester, I think the title of the class is Two Personality Types, and that pretty much captures it. But, the question is going to be, what are these two personality types? So, well, let's just give some background. Where do the ideas that we're going to talk about come from? They come from a swarm of Polish Hasidus that I have seen. They seem to originate, we're going to have a source here from Rav Simcha Bunim of Parshischa, who was the Rebbe of the Kotzker Rebbe, and also the Mea Shiloach, the first Ishbitzer Rebbe, learned from him. It's the earliest source I'm going to be using, at least the earliest source that develops the idea to any extent. But when you get to the Mea Shiloach, who was a student of the Kotzker Rebbe, and especially when you get to the Mea Shiloach's students, Reb Tzedek Kohen, and the Mea Shiloach's son, the Beis Yaakov, you really have the ideas that are just barely touched on by the Kol Simcha, the Rav Simcha Bunim. You have them developed to a great extent, and then you find them reflected in other Sifrei Hasidus as well, including the Sfas Emes, who talks about it, talks about these things a lot. All right, that's where the ideas comes from. But basic outline: there are two personality types that are characterized by certain characteristics that we're going to begin to go into today. That the characters in Sefer Bereshis, some of the characters in Sefer Bereshis, lend themselves to categorization by means of these types. And we're going to develop what the personality types are. We're going to show how in Chumash, recognizing these personality types will enrich your understanding of the motivation of major characters in Chumash. And then we're going to suggest that these two personality types are present throughout Jewish history, and we'll discuss how they might be visible, active in our world. All right, enough, and possibly the recognition of these two types of people, two types of Jews, will bring you some self-awareness, be practical in your own lives. I think discussion of the basic personality types will carry us through 7 or 8 of the 10 scheduled shiurim, and then in the remaining shiurim, we'll talk about some corollary ideas that also involve characters in Tanakh, but not the ones we started with necessarily. All right, let's get started with sources. Yeah, the first 4 or 5 shiurim are going to be, each of them are going to be based on a parsha in the second half of Sefer Bereshis. So we're going to go through from Vayetze through Vayigash, and this shiur deals mostly, but not exclusively, with ideas that are introduced in Parshas Vayetze. So let's start with some psukim in Parshas Vayetze. This is where, Rachel appears at the very beginning of the Parsha, when Yaakov comes to Aram Naharayim, and she's the first member of the family who greets him, but we're reintroduced to her later on. So let me read the psukim that reintroduce us to Rachel and introduce us literally to Leah. Let's wait till Rachel gets connected. Ulavan shetei banos. Lavan had 2 daughters. Shem Hagdola Leah. The name of the older one was Leah. V'Shem Hakatana Rachel. And the name of the younger one was Rachel. Ve'enei Leah Rakos. Leah's eyes were tender. V'Rachel Haisa Yefas Toar V'Yefas Mar'eh. And Rachel was beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance. Vayehav Yaakov es Rachel, and Yaakov loved Rachel. Vayomer, and he said to Lavan, Evadcha sheva shanim b'Rachel bitcha haktana. I'll work for you for 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. So here we are introduced to the two daughters of Lavan, and Yaakov asks Lavan for Rachel's hand in marriage. So let's deal with two questions here that are dealt with by the Meforshim, but we're going to take Rav Tzadok Cohen's approach to them. Let's see. Let's deal. All right. Well, first of all, when you introduce characters in a story, lahavdil, big lahavdil, when you start off a novel, and of course, in the first chapter, you are introduced to your main characters. And a good novelist tries to give you an idea of who these people are before things start happening to them. Okay, so you'll try to familiarize your reader with characteristics about the features of the personalities of the characters that are going to be relevant later in the story. Okay, lahavdil, something like that is going on here. We're about to be told a story in which the major characters are the four people we just mentioned, in order of appearance: Lavan, Leah, Rachel, and Yaakov. And Rachel and Leah are just entering the scene over here. So you'd expect the Torah to tell us things about Leah and Rachel that are going to be relevant to the rest of the story. But the Torah tells us, as it generally does, it tells us precious little about these people. But it does give us some introductory qualities of Leah and Rachel that we have to know from the very beginning. Leah's eyes were tender, and Rachel was beautiful of form, beautiful of appearance. Very little to go on there, but okay. When it comes to Rachel, again, big lahavdil. I'm going to talk about it in these terms because I can express myself best in these terms, but I don't want you to think that I have a literary approach to Tanakh, chas v'sholom. I take the approach of the classical Meforshim, and however we study literature has very little relevance, if any at all, to how we study Tanakh. Nevertheless, to make the question clear. Okay. To say that Rachel was beautiful of form, beautiful of appearance, tells me something important about Rachel. And when the story plays out, I can see how these qualities are going to tell us something about the things that happen to Rachel and the way she responds to them. People relate to women who are beautiful in a particular way. And if you know a little bit about psychology, and I know a little bit, beautiful women have a tendency, I don't want to make any generalizations that chas v'sholom this applies to all of them, but there are ways of behavior that characterize beautiful women more than women who aren't beautiful, particularly a certain degree of self-absorption. You know, they're used to having men want to do things for them. That happens. It doesn't happen in people of strong character, but it happened. It is, and there's enough of that going on that you can make a generalization. Of course, it didn't apply to Rachel. At least we don't see that at all. But to say that she was beautiful says something about her and might explain her reactions to things that are going to happen or why those things happen to her. Good. I get it. I don't know too much about Rachel from that description, but I know something. But Leah, her eyes were tender. That's all you need to know. And I don't even know what it means. I'm translating it. Do you know anybody whose eyes are tender or untender? I don't describe people in those terms. But that's all I have to know. Now we can get on with the rest of the story. It's not telling you anything about Leah. Okay? We'll get to that question. But I'll ask the second question that Rav Tzadok deals with, though he doesn't articulate, but other Meforshim do. Look again at these psukim. We have these descriptions of Leah and Rachel. Leah's eyes were tender. Rachel was beautiful of form and beautiful of appearance. Vayahav Yaakov es Rachel, and Yaakov loved Rachel. You know what it sounds like? Where did I see this? I think I saw it in the Sfas Emes over Shabbos. He asked the question. He comes out and asks it. It looks like Yaakov fell in love with Rachel and wanted to marry her. Why? Because she was attractive, physically attractive. That's it. That's all. Is that what the foundation of the Jewish people is built on? Something so shallow? Is that it? That's why Yaakov loved Rachel and wanted to marry her? Nothing more to it than that? So if I gave you half a minute to come up with an answer to that question, you probably would. But you'd probably come up with the same answer that Reb Tzadok comes up with. And that is that the pasuk surely doesn't mean that Rachel was attractive just in the most superficial sense. That we don't have to deny that that's what it means also. But if that were all there was to it, Yaakov would have found somebody else. When it says Rachel was so beautiful, the quality that attracted Yaakov to her was the fact that she wasn't just beautiful in the most superficial sense. Yaakov is here. By this time, he's been living with his uncle and his first cousins for about a month, I think, 30 days. And he's seeing these young ladies in all kinds of different situations. And he noticed that this one, Rachel, lives a beautiful life. She's in all kinds of situations, and she knows exactly what the right thing is to do in any given situation. She's a natural. She leads a beautiful life. That is the quality of beauty that attracted Yaakov to Rachel. But then he sees the other first cousin also, and he did not ask that cousin to marry him because Einei Leah Rakos, the eyes were tender. So, what is that? What does that even mean? Not only what is it? Forget about why is it important. What does it mean? What's simple pshat? So let's look at Rashi. Rashi knew we'd be bothered by that. Good question, Racheli. Everybody see Racheli's question? Answering off the cuff, it deserves more thought than I'm giving it. But I would say that there were things about the way Rachel comported herself, even at that first encounter, that, Yaakov, who, to make an understatement, must have been an excellent judge of human character. He saw right away that you take a young woman and make her a shepherd in this kind of situation where she's coming to the well and the other shepherds are, it's not a simple situation. There's a way she conducted herself that indicated to Yaakov right away that this was a special woman, and the next 30 days just confirmed his first impression and made it even deeper. That's what I would say off the cuff. Okay, so now we have, what does it mean that her eyes were tender, were soft? Let's read the Rashi. Rakos. Shehaisa svura la'asos begoralo shel Esav. She was under the impression that she was going to wind up in Esav's lot. In other words, she was going to wind up as Esav's wife. Uvachsa, and she cried. Shahayu hakol omrim, because everybody was saying, Shnei vanim l'Rivka, Rivka has two sons, Ushitei vanos l'Lavan, and Lavan has two daughters, Hagadola l'Gadol, the elder daughter should go to the elder son, they're a match, V'haktana l'Katan, and the younger daughter is a match for the younger son. So Leah heard people saying that she was a suitable match for Esav, and she started crying. And the simple pshat of Rashi is because she recognized that Esav was no great Metziah, and the future was Esav, was not going to be a future that would give her any satisfaction in life. So she cried because she didn't want to have a miserable marriage. Fair enough. Simple pshat in Rashi. But Reb Tzadok goes deeper. And why did she cry? Well, she cried because she's going to wind up with Esav, but there's more to that. Rashi says she heard people saying that the older daughter Leah is a suitable match for the older son Esav. Listen, Leah knew it's not just because I'm a little bit older than my sister and he's a few minutes or few older than Yaakov. That's the age difference is completely immaterial. That's not why they're saying I'm a good shidduch for Esav. No. Leah recognized that she doesn't have her sister's beauty. As Reb Tzadok said, as I said earlier, Rachel, put her in any situation, she looks beautiful. She's a natural. She does the right thing. And from Yaakov Avinu's perspective, Yaakov's thinking, this woman is attuned to the Ratzon Hashem. She knows exactly what Hashem wants from her in any given situation, and she does it. This is the kind of woman who should be the female ancestor of the holy people. And Leah recognized that quality in her sister. And you know what else she recognized? She didn't have that quality. Oh yeah, Leah was a tzedekah. We know that. But that's not what she focused on when she was, 20 years old. How old was she now? I don't know, something like that. And she said, I know, I don't know how much she focused on her good qualities. We're going to talk about that very shortly, but she surely recognized she was not Yefas Toar, Yefas Mara in the deep sense of the word. If you looked at her in a moment of weakness, and unlike her sister, she had moments of weakness, a person who just looked at her then and freeze frame at that moment, you could reasonably conclude, oh, this is the female counterpart of Esav. This is a woman who has Esav's midos. They're a perfect match. Of course, she wasn't like that all the time. But if you weren't with her all the time, if you were just at her at the wrong times, just with her at the wrong times, you could reasonably make that error. And that killed her. That made her feel so bad. Not because I'm going to have a miserable husband, but because I'm the kind of person who people think is a suitable match for Esav. They're not thinking that about my sister. No, but I'm not my sister. And she cried, not tears of competition with her sister. She cried because she recognized she had those imperfections. She had so much about herself that she had to fix up. And as Rav Tzadok puts it, the tears she cried were tears of teshuvah. And that's not a trivial element in her personality. We're not just saying things about her eyes. We're talking about the most deeply ingrained qualities of her personality. She recognized she was a person, she's not a natural beauty like her sister. She's going to have to struggle, and she's going to have to fix herself to really correct her flaws. And she cried, Hashem, help me succeed. Help me overcome certain natural tendencies that I'm prone to succumb to. And that's the beginning of the story. Because we're jumping ahead a little bit, we'll get back to this Kol Simcha in minutes, but because if you look in Tanakh, every single Baal Teshuvah is a descendant of Leah. Right away, in fact, we're going to be talking about it at some length next week in Rosh Hashanah. The first person whose Teshuvah is described in detail in Tanakh is Leah's, in a certain sense, her main son, Yehuda. He really messed up with Tamar. And at the end, he courageously said, Tzadka mimeni. She's right. I'm wrong. I messed up. And the greatest Baal Teshuvah of all time, and here I'll ask for some classroom participation, was who? Who was the greatest Baal Teshuvah of all time? Come on, take a guess. When I tell you the answer, you'll agree with me. Yes, Woody.
Yosef.
Interesting you're going to say that. I'm going to say you're dead wrong. Not that he was the opposite, because we're going to get to, he's descendant of Rachel, and he's described just like his mother, Yefei Toar Yefei Mareh, and he is the model of resisting temptation. The same beauty as his mother, okay? But you're right, he's outstanding in a different way. He is remarkable. But who is the outstanding, who is somebody who really did mess up in a worse way than Yehuda? And he's still considered an outstanding tzaddik.
Herczeg, can we answer?
Yes.
David.
That's the answer of Tzadok gives. You know, the story of Bathsheba and David comes off looking worse even than his many times great-grandfather, who looks pretty bad with Tamar, right? But David with Bathsheba, not just Bathsheba, Uriah. I mean, here, of course, it's not gross adultery and murder, but after all the mitigating factors, and they're not excuses, they're real, David doesn't look pretty in this story. And so much of Tehillim is David's recognition of his Aveira and praying to Hashem for forgiveness. Tehillim, Sefer Malachim, right? And David, bad things happen. David loses a child because as a part of his punishment for that Aveira. But he pulls through, And Hashem not only forgives him, but Mashiach is not going to come from Rachel. There is a Mashiach ben Yosef, right? But the Mashiach ben Yosef is there. I'll get to you in a moment, Racheli. Is there to pave the way and assist Mashiach ben David in his ultimate mission. So the descendants of Leah, the Baalei Teshuvah, they might not strike you as being so beautiful at first, but ultimately they get to a higher place than the descendants of Rachel. Now, Racheli, you asked the question, and I want to answer your question in today's shiur, but I'm not going to get to it right now, because I do want to talk about Rachel and Leah first before going off on tangents. So if I don't get to your question on my own in, let's say, the next 20 minutes, please ask it again. Okay. So now, the fact that Leah's eyes were tender really is the most important thing you have to know about her. Leah is the classical Balas Teshuvah personality, and Rachel is the classical Tzadikis Gemura, or Tzadik Gamur. Every Baal Teshuvah in Tanakh, Chizkiyahu HaMelech, there are others, Ruvain, there are others, Menashe, who the Tanakh doesn't mention his Teshuvah, just as Avera, but they're all descended from Leah. And from Rachel, we already mentioned Yosef HaTzadik. He and Binyamin are the only one of the Shiftei. There are three people in the Gemara, I believe, who get the three Tanakh characters who get the title Tzadik. The Gemara calls Yosef a Tzadik. The Gemara calls Binyamin a Tzadik. And the Gemara calls Mordechai, who is descended from Binyamin, descended from Rachel, a Tzadik. So Rachel is the mother of the families, the tribes of Yosef and Binyamin, who are, do you have a question there? Or is that just a stretch? Just a stretch, okay. So Rachel is herself Yefas Torah v'Yefas Mara. She's the mother of Yosef, who's Yefei Torah v'Yefei Mara. So this beautiful family is descended from Rachel, and they're a major component of the Jewish people. But Leah is the ancestor of the other family. It's a bigger family. She is the ancestor of the people who don't always look so pretty. You know, they do things that really look ugly, but they know how to grapple with those situations. They don't always succeed, but when they succeed, they hit the jackpot. B'makom sheba'alei teshuvah omdim, tzadikim gmurim einam yicholim la'amod. In the place where Baalei Teshuvah to stand, the tzadikim gmurim are unable to stand. So the way these students of the Kotzker Rebbe understand that is that the tzadik gamur, the Rachel Yosef type, all right, no one's perfect, but they have a tendency towards perfection. And they lead their lives very conscious of the fact that this material world is composed of dichotomies. There is mutar and there's asr. There is tahor and there is tameh. There is pasul and there is kasher. Life is we are in a certain limited area of life that is surrounded by red lines, and we can't cross those red lines. We shouldn't even get close to them, right? Whereas the Leah personality, the Yehuda, the David personality, not only do they get close to the red lines, they slip and they cross the red lines. And when we do that, we are in big trouble. But it's not all over. Hashem said, yeah, I know. People, life is hard, and it's hard to stay within the permitted limits. And when you cross the limits, it's not all over. That's when plan B kicks in. Plan A is be like Rachel, be like Yosef, be perfect. Oops, I'm not perfect anymore. Okay, it's not all over. Now we have a whole new challenge for you. Can you do teshuvah? It's not easy. It's not easy. But if you do teshuvah, and there are all kinds of grades of teshuvah. There's minimal quality teshuvah, to industrial quality teshuvah. Yeah, okay, you're not going to get punished. A little bit better, okay, we'll forget about the Avera. It's like you never did it. You're as good as new. And then there's teshuvah me'ahava. You do teshuvah motivated purely out of love of Hashem, no personal consideration. How this happens, we're not going to talk about today. But what happens is you get credit for your Avera. That Avera becomes as a chus. How can that be? I ate a ham sandwich and I'm in a higher part of Gan Eden because I ate the ham sandwich? Yes, that can happen only to a Baal Teshuvah. The Rachel family, they don't get to that place. You, the Baal Teshuvah, and that's the good characteristic, one of the good characteristics of the Leah family, that gets you to a place that's somebody from the Rachel family never crossed the red line. Ugh, that's darkness, that's ugliness. I want to stay far away from there. Good, you're doing the right thing. But you, the person from the Leah family, you messed up. But through hard work, you realized that if I handle, my adventure into the realm of darkness, which I never should have gotten into, but if I handle that right, through lots of hard work, you can discover that deep down, beneath that darkness, there's light. There's a type of light that the beautiful people, the Rachel, Yosef, Benjamin people, they never see it. You're in a beautiful place that they never get to. And that's why Mashiach is Ben David. Herczeg says explicitly, we understand a little bit of what, the job description for Mashiach is. He's supposed to be a great leader, and he's supposed to get the goyim off of our backs, and he's supposed to build the Beis HaMikdash. Yeah, that's all part of the job description. But according to Herczeg, and I'm sure he's not the only one, the main part of his job description that, the Rambam doesn't mention this, and I don't know if the Rambam would agree with this, but the main part of his job description is he is going to lead the Jewish people to Teshuvah Me'ahava. That's what he's going to do, and as a result, all these other nice things are going to happen. But that's the main thing. That's the main thing. We build the Beis HaMikdash because we deserve the Beis HaMikdash again, because Mashiach has taught us how to improve ourselves. Okay, that's a brief introduction to Rachel and Leah and the Rachel and Leah families. Let's get into more details. Now, at this point already, once I've made the main point of today's shir, I can get to the question that Racheli asked a few minutes ago, and that is, don't we have a Baal Teshuvah character preceding Leah and Yehuda, etc.? And that's Yishmael. At the end of Parshas Chayei, when Avraham Avinu dies, so at the funeral, Yitzchak is mentioned ahead of Yishmael, and Rashi mentions, even though Yitzchak's younger, and Rashi mentions that this indicates that Yishmael gave Yitzchak the place of honor because by the time Avraham Avinu died, Yishmael became Baal Teshuvah, and he recognized that Yitzchak is his superior. So you have a Baal Teshuvah who precedes Leah and Yehuda, etc., that whole family. And the answer is that's true. It really, these personality types that I'm just introducing, there's more to their character than I've mentioned so far. But these personalities become developed and illustrated best through these two families within the Jewish people. But you have roots even earlier in Avraham and Yitzchak, and each of them had a bad son. Avraham had a bad son, Ishmael, and Yitzchak had a bad son, Esav. You know what? All right, I already started talking about it. So that reflects two other qualities that are components in these two personality types. How do Chazal characterize Abraham versus Yitzchak? Let's talk about their good traits. So let's talk about Yitzchak because there's one word that pops up in Midrashim and in Sifrei Kabbalah to describe Yitzchak's strength, and that is strength, Gevura. We'll define that in a minute. The counterpart in Avraham Avinu is not characterized by Gevura. He is characterized by a quality that has two names. Well, two qualities that go together, not exactly the same thing. There's Gedula, greatness, but that's really the poor translation in this context. Expansiveness, and Chesed, which is also a positive type of expansiveness. I reach out to the person who has some sort of need. And we're going to see these traits in Rachel and Leah in a moment, but let's finish off. Where does Ishmael fit into the picture? Now, if you're expansive, that means you have an outward-oriented personality. You're not autonomous. By nature, you want to strike up relationships with people. You're curious about the world outside. There's all kinds of wonderful experiences, things out there that you want to know about. The outside world attracts you. So Gedula, which I'm translating expansiveness, this is, I'm sure it's not completely precise, but that is the extroverted personality. The person who thrives on coming into contact with people and things. A person who lives by through their relationships to people and things outside of themselves. That's an extrovert. It doesn't mean a person who's not shy. Introverts don't have to be shy. Introverts can be very sociable, but they don't need other people to turn them on, to create that ignition spark. They're more autonomous. Put them together with an interesting book, an interesting Sugya and Gemara, an interesting Parsha and Tanakh, a good Ramban. They can spend hours and hours. These are the kind of people who don't need to learn with Chavruta. There's some people, if I don't have somebody to discuss what I'm interested in, I can't even get started. It's through the dialogue that I come alive. And there are other people, I mean, the extreme, there are individuals who Chavruta is just a distraction. But there are other individuals, you know, there are few people who are perfect extroverts, perfect introverts. Most people are somewhere in the middle. There are a lot of people, if I don't have a Chavruta, my mind's going to wander. I need that Chavruta to really focus me. And there are other people who, let's say you're a yeshiva bacher who's putting in a good at least 10 hours. It's enough for me, 2.5, 3 hours to have a chavruta. The rest of the time, a chavruta is a distraction, right? Those are the people who are more introverted. Doesn't mean they're shy. They have less of a need for relationships. Getting back to Avraham and Yitzchak and their sons, Yishmael and Esav, the bad sons. Avraham, Gedula, expansiveness. Avraham had this message for the world. Hashem didn't just create you, he's part of your life. Recognize him, strike up a relationship with him. And he built this, he had this tent, this tremendous inn where he invited people, and people made him a big leader. He lived on this big stage. The whole world was his stage, and he wasn't just an actor. He was there, he wanted to influence, and this great idea, Hashem is there relating to you, and relate to him back. An outgoing person, the big idea. But, we have big ideas, and they can peter out. They stop being in the headlines after a while. People get bored of hearing the same idea, and either they fade away, or, when they catch on, when people realize that, you don't have to, this idea doesn't just apply to the big dramatic areas of life. They apply to the little guy too, who leads a small scale life. The focus of his life isn't changing the world. No, it's getting along with his family, doing a good job, right? For an idea to really catch on, become permanent, become a kinyan, you have to show that it's not just for the dramatic occasions. It's not just, when you've got a big audience. The nooks and crannies in life, the little things. Look at Yitzchak compared to Avram Avinu. Yitzchak is gevura. Gevura is self-discipline. He doesn't initiate things. He's passive. His big moment in our minds, we don't know what his big moment was, but in our minds, the Akedah. Who initiated the Akedah? Avram Avinu. Yitzchak, give credit as credit where credit is due, but what Yitzchak did was passive. He wasn't initiating. It's, my father tells me I have to give up my life. Hey, I could object. I could make a fuss, right? But no, I'm strong. You make a demand on me. I know your demand is from Hashem. I don't fight back. I obey. I have self-discipline. And Yitzchak, we don't see him trying to change the world. He's not like Avraham Avinu, even before you get to the Torah Shabbat. In the Torah Shabbat, he takes his 318 men, let's do battle, right? Yitzchak doesn't do things like that. I'm not going to say that Yitzchak's family life was like our family lives, led on the same scale, but it sure looks like it. Here's a man, the 3 people closest to him. He's got 2 sons and a wife. Every single one of them tricked him. Every single one of them would manage to pull the wool over his eyes. Hey, those are kind of normal family situations, the kind of complications you find in a normal family. So Yitzchak, he's anything but normal. But to us, he represents a normal man taking the same values that the heroic figure of Avraham Avinu was promoting and living what looks to be a normal life based on those values. And where does this leave us with Yishmael and Esav? So, the Jewish people isn't perfected till you have Yaakov and his family. Yaakov, his 4 wives, his 12 children. We have a family where everybody's a tzaddik. But that's after a process of refinement. Didn't start out that way. Avram Avinu he's got the quality of gedula. Okay, so there's positive gedula and there's negative gedula. Gedula is you want to strike up relationships. You want to get involved with the outside world. So we already said that the positive quality of the Avram Avinu, the gedula type, is chesed. Chesed, I want to go out to the world and make the world better. I want to make people's lives happier. That's great. But if you're not so inclined, you take this, I want to go out and experience everything. I want to try it all. Well, there's a lot of things that are going to, you can't just, it's taiva, right? That's the weak point of the outgoing personality. You want to strike up relationship with him. Great, within limits. The difficulty is keeping within limits. That's taiva. So Avraham Avinu had to get rid of the negative side of taiva. The negative side of taiva is, the negative side of gedula, the negative side of expansiveness is taiva. That's Yishmael. Yishmael is para Adam. He's a wild donkey. He's just, I've got nothing against Hashem. I'm not a big ball, but hey, I just want to have a good time, and I don't think twice. I want immediate gratification, right? I mean, we know Yishmael can be very cruel, but even when they're cruel and murderous, it's, you know what, Lahavdil, the biggest quote-unquote mitzvah by them to, when you want to kill the unbelievers in Islam, the mitzvah min mahadrin is with a knife. That is so inefficient. You only kill one at a time. And even if, you don't even know if you're going to kill the person. It's easier to survive a knife wound than even a gun wound, right? But it's just the bloodlust, it's the passion, it's satisfying a certain urge. That's, okay, that's terrible, but you're still, the possibility for teshuvah exists. And Yishmael did teshuvah. But let's look at Yitzchak. Yitzchak is Gevura. I'm under control. I'm a strong personality. Oh, so if you're humble enough to recognize that there's a God above you, and you're going to take your strength and use it in the service of Hashem, you're a real tzaddik. That's Yosef. Yosef is the shore. He's the ox. Yosef has that quality of Gevura like his grandfather Yitzchak. Pile it on me. All right? I can control myself. I'm your slave. I'm your beast of burden. Okay? But let's say that you have that raw material of the strong personality. I look at all those people, they're weak, they give in, they have no self-control. I can control myself. I can delay gratification. You have that kind of personality. If you don't see that there's a God above you, you'd begin to develop contempt for everybody. You look down on the people who you view as being weaker than you, who don't control themselves as well as you can, and you start becoming an arrogant, inhumane person who you become the center of your universe, and you hate the people who defy you. You become the master race, and you view the people who defy you as subhumans, and you won't hesitate to kill. Not because killing, you'll make an industry out of killing. You know, the Muslim terrorists, what's the gold medal? The Twin Towers. Wow, 3,000 people in one shot. It was only one shot, right? Wow, you have hundreds of millions of young Muslims who were, they're not worshiping the ball players, they're worshiping those guys who died in the Twin Towers, right? 3,000 people. On an average day in Auschwitz, 6,000 people were murdered. It was an industry. It wasn't passion. It was cold and calculated. Esav is much worse than Yishmael. So what I'm describing in terms of the families of Rachel and Leah really are present in Avram and Yitzchak also. Avram is the prototype of what we're calling the Leah personality. Yitzchak is the prototype of what we're calling the Rachel Yosef personality. Okay? And it really starts earlier, but I don't even want to get into the earlier now till I have it better organized in my mind. Okay, but now let's finish off. I want to get back to all, we have enough time, I can do all these sources, but let's skip the Kol Simcha and Mei HaShiloach for right now. And once I've gotten into Gedula already, let's talk about how that applies to the Leah family. Oh, so now you see already, the people who have Gedula, expansiveness, they are very curious. They want to experience everything up to their tzaddikim. They don't want to cross the red lines, but I want to live life to the fullest, and that means getting right up to the red line. It's kosher, right? Whereas the Rachel Yosef family have a tendency towards chumrah, which, hold on to these sheets, we're going to deal with them next time also, which has a tendency towards chumrah. Their attitude is, the red line, boy, I don't even want to get near there. I don't need it. I'll stay inside the base of Medrash or inside the safe spaces, right? I don't need to, I don't need everything. I'm content with certain really good things, and I want to keep it, I don't even want to get close. So they don't mess up, and they don't have the opportunities for teshuvah. Okay, now let's go to this pasuk in Parshas Vayishlach, before, when we have the trouble with Dinah and Shechem. Vateitzei Dinah bas Leah. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, went out to mingle with the daughters of the Lirostas, to see the daughters of the land, and then, unfortunately, she was molested and abducted by Shechem. Okay, so Rashi here asks the question. We have Dinah here is described unusually. We usually describe both men and women in terms of their fathers, not in terms of their mothers. So Rashi says, Velo bas Yaakov, wasn't she Yaakov's daughter? Ela al shem Yitziasa bas Leah. But because of her going out, she's a daughter of Leah. Sha'af hi yatzanis faisa, that she too was a woman who would be outgoing, let's say. Shenemar, as it says, Vateitzei Leah likraso. Leah went out to greet him. That's in Parshas Vayetze, when Rachel wanted to do the im. So Leah said, I'll give you the dudaim that Ruvain picked for me for the right to spend the night with Yaakov, which was really your right, Rachel. You give that right to me, then you can have my dudaim. And she paid her. And then after they struck this deal, it says that Leah went out to greet Yaakov. So what's this midrash saying? This is Medrash, the Rashi's quoting. Dinah is described as Bas Leah because here she is exhibiting a characteristic of Leah. She gets into trouble, Vateitzei Dinah Bas Leah liros bivnos haaretz. She went out to see what's going on with the daughters of the land, and she's called Bas Leah because here she's taking the quality of Leah and misapplying it. It's a dangerous quality. Leah is Gedula, the outgoing personality. This Rav Soloveitchik develops in one of his Sfarim. I forget which one. Sefer Yemei Zikaron. He has a chapter on this. Leah, you see, the word Yatzanis, it's really a derogatory term. In other contexts, Chazal use this word for a prostitute, someone who's far too outgoing, right? So Rav Soloveitchik says, Chas v'sholom, they're not calling Leah by such a derogatory name. But this is a quality that you have to be careful about. If you misapply your extroverted tendencies, you can really get into trouble like Dinah did, right? So you see, this quality of Gedula is expressed in Leah and in Dinah. So before we end, let's go back and learn one of the other sources here. The third one, Kol Simcha, Rav Simcha Bunim of Parshischa, the Rebbe of the Kotzker and of the Ishbitzer Rebbe. Pasuk in Vayetze. Vayar Hashem kisnuah Leah, and the next words is Vayiftach es rachma. Hashem saw that Leah was hated, so she opened her womb. Hashem compensated Leah by giving her children. So, comments. Has shalom lomar kain shehatzadik sonei es ishto. God forbid to say that a tzaddik hates his wife. You look at this on the simple shot, it looks like Hashem saw that Yaakov hated Leah, so he compensated her with children, but Rav Simcha Bunim says that's intolerable. No, if a husband and wife really hate each other, they're not supposed to stay married. They really aren't. There's one thing, there are plenty of people who are in marriages that are far from ideal. There are marriages that can be a struggle, but when it gets to hatred, especially at tzaddik, the tzaddik and tzaddikis will not remain married if it gets to hatred. So how can it be that this marriage is lasting on hatred? However, we will explain the tzaddik who worships, who serves Hashem, who tomid sonei es atzmo. I'll translate literally, and then I have to make a qualification. He always hates himself. I can't believe that the Reb Simcha Bunim means us to take this literally. And by the way, he didn't write this sefer. These were students who wrote things that they heard. You must never hate yourself. But he means hate certain things about yourself. All right, there are always aspects of yourself that cause you great dissatisfaction. And he always finds deficiencies in himself. That he's not fulfilling the obligation of his avoda to Hashem Yisparach. This is what it means when it says Hashem saw that Leah was hated. Perush, that means certain aspects of her were hateful in her own eyes. There were things about herself that she couldn't tolerate. There were things about herself that made her cry. So here we see that same idea that Rab Tzadok introduced us to, that Leah is the type of individual who is well aware of her real deficiencies and is doesn't forgive herself, doesn't say, oh, that's okay. No. She's honest with herself and she wants to improve. Racheli, I see there must have been a message to me that I must have missed because I see 3 where before there were 2. You want to repeat your question? All right, if you want to hold on to the question to next time or whatever. Next time, come back with these.
I don't think I sent anything.
Oh, okay, because it looked like just
or it wasn't on purpose. Oh no, okay. It was from Rabbi Friedman.
Rabbi. So yeah, right. So it does. Rabbi Friedman, yeah, you had a question.
I just was asking if Rabbi could clarify the statement where Bali Tshuva stand. So I think in Gemorim can't. I just wanted as a based in light.
Yes. The Tzaddik Gomor, when he looks across the other side of the red line, it's all darkness and sickness and repulsion. He never goes there. Keeps away. The Baal Teshuvah is stuck there. He messed up. He crossed the red line. And at first, it really was everything repugnant, right? However, through Teshuvah, they realized that what initially looked like darkness and tumah to me it led me through this tuma, to this teshuva experience, and I see now that nothing is absolutely dark. Once you're on the dark side, you do teshuva, you come to the realization, the perception that there is a great light there. That act that you thought was an Aveira, deep down inside, it must have come from Hashem. And I got to the point where I could recognize that even that Aveira must have come to Hashem. The Tzaddik Gomor never has that perception. He never sees the light that is at the core of the darkness. That's the mokum that he never gets to. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good week. We'll come back to these ideas next week, and we'll get started discussing. Oh, we're going to focus on Yosef next week and the contrast between him and his uncle Esau. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.